Good evening. I'm Anuj Mehrotra, Dean of the George Washington School of Business, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this episode of George Talks Business. And today it is my distinct pleasure and privilege to be introducing our 19th president of George Washington University, Ellen Granberg, and it's a great time to be talking to her right at the eve of our inauguration. Thank you for joining us today.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Indeed. And I know we have several questions that have been submitted, and you will find your questions somewhere along in the way I have framed my questions included in there, so look out for that. But we'll also be taking some audience questions, and I think you have received some scans, that little palm card, and we will be using this technology, and I'll be shifting between several of these iPads to figure out which question to take from you. So please go ahead and do that, and we'll do that. So President Granberg, there has been so much. The community is so excited to have you here. And of course, we have read your bio. We are familiar a little bit about your biography overall. But the students particularly are very interested in really, who are inspired by you and your career, to understand more personally. And if you could give us a little bit of your personal information, where you grew up, and then lead us through your career to how you have become the president of George Washington University.
Okay, I love to tell stories, so I'll tell a story. So I was born and raised in San Francisco, California, and I started out being the oldest of a family of two, and my sister, my younger sister Mara, is here tonight. In 1976, we became a family of 6 brothers and sisters because my mother married her second husband. And so I think of myself as being the oldest of 6. And I was, when I was young, I was a pretty quiet, bookish kid. I loved walking, I loved reading, I loved cooking. I had the insane idea that I could be a fashion designer when I grew up. And then I discovered I can't draw. And so that was the end of that. I attended the University of California at Davis, where I majored in history, and was lucky enough there to get involved in some student affairs activities. I worked on the student paper and was the editor-in-chief of the student paper for the last part of my time at Davis. And there I discovered a talent and an enjoyment of business problems and of leadership. And so towards the end of my college career, I just assumed I was going to go off and be a college professor like my mother had. And I got really interested in maybe potentially pursuing a career in business. And so I went out on the market like college seniors do. And I was lucky enough to get picked up at what at the time was called Pacific Bell. And it was the phone company out in California and Nevada that was formed right after AT&T divested. And I thought, oh, I'll just be here for a couple of years and get a little work experience, and then I'll go ahead and go back and become the college professor I thought I always would. And I ended up staying 11 years. and you know, I stayed because I was having a really wonderful experience doing work that was really interesting. And but eventually I rediscovered my love of learning, and I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to leave Pac Bell in my early 30s, move to Nashville, Tennessee, and get a PhD in sociology, and then was hired on the faculty at Clemson University. And at that point, I was very sure I had signed my last appraisal, I had made my last compensation decision, I was going to be a faculty member. And for 17 years, I was very, very happy teaching, working with students. And I got drafted into being a department chair very reluctantly. And then I found out, actually, I liked it more than I thought I would, and I was pretty good at it. And looking around, I could see there was a desperate need for semi-talented leadership in academic higher ed. And so, one thing led to another. And so I was invited to move into associate provost roles, and then eventually was hired as provost at RIT, and from there recruited here.
So that's awesome. You mentioned you spent 11 years working in business.
Yes.
So were there any takeaways from business that have helped you and transfer over to the academia?
Oh yeah. So there's many things that have helped me, but I'll just mention 2. One is a bias toward action. that when a mentor once said, it's fine to be able to accurately describe a problem and admire a problem, but that really doesn't matter if you can't solve the problem. And in business, that's one of the things you learn. I mean, things have to be dealt with. And so I learned skills for how to do that, how to move things through. So that's been incredibly useful in the time that I have been in higher ed. The other thing that's been very useful is being really comfortable with the business elements of higher ed, budgets, HR, all those sorts of things, because I came up through a Fortune 500 corporation. So I got a chance to see some of those best practices, and that's extremely helpful.
Great. So you also mentioned that you had your PhD in sociology, right? Mm-hmm. And from what I understand, that probably lends itself very well to being an effective leader. Is there a connection? Do sociologists make better leaders?
So that is an excellent question. I don't know for sure that being a sociologist makes one a better leader any more than being an engineer makes one a better leader. But what I will say is that there's a few things that sociology I have found to be incredibly helpful. Part of it is to understand group dynamics and to understand some of the levers that push groups one direction or another. Understanding motivation, understanding status and power and how that functions in an organization, I think can be very, very useful, particularly when you're navigating difficult issues where lots of people disagree.
Mm-hmm. So we'll definitely get back to that, and we'll definitely get back to more leadership things. But I want to change topics a little bit. You have spent a few months at GW now, and we like to hear what are our GW unique advantages from your lens.
Yes. So some of you who have heard me speak have heard me say that I was once given a wonderful piece of advice, which is to find your university's unfair advantages. And there are many, many, many of those here at GW, but I'll mention a couple. Our proximity is absolutely amazing. Now, sometimes it means that protesters come through your campus unannounced, but this is such an amazing place, not only because of the people who are here, but because of exactly where we're located. And that's it's an amazing gift for the student experience, for the research that faculty can do. What it also lends itself to, which is another unfair advantage, is the way in which we have the incredible professional qualifications of our faculty. There are people teaching here who most universities would absolutely kill for. And they do try to recruit them away on a regular basis. And often it's our location that leads them to choose to stay. So I could go on and on, but those are a couple of, I think, our most distinctive advantages as an institution of higher ed.
Great. So when you joined, you brought us fortune. We also became a member of the AAU. Yeah. Would you like to tell us why that is important to be a member of the AAU and how it makes us distinguished now?
So the Association of American Universities is an invitation-only group of the very best universities in North America. And there is a super secret formula that if I can't tell you what it is, I actually don't know what it is, but what it really looks at are the highest levels of academic scholarship. The areas where achieving these things is truly competitive, that it's not based on who you know, it's not based on having the right relationship with a senator who happens to be a member of the Appropriations Committee. It's based on achieving things competitively. And you don't get into the AAU if you're not at the very top of all North American universities. And so every 3 years, they announce who the new members are. They keep the membership right about 70 or 71. So some people sometimes have to leave for others to be up there. So it's an incredible honor, and it really reflects a decade's worth of outstanding work by the faculty. The books, the articles, the citations, the national awards, the grants, that's what got us into the AAU.
So President Granberg, I know you're also embarking on a strategic planning process, and one of the strategic decisions needs to be on how to make sure that we are not kicked out of AAU now that we are in there. So tell us a little bit about some of the things that you'll be focusing on in terms of strategic planning, and particularly as they relate to how GW can be great at collaboration across campus?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing I do want to reassure everyone of is that we are in no danger of getting kicked out of the AAU. You know, we're right in the middle of the group. We're not hanging on to the edges. So we're in really good shape. So how do we stay there? How do we get better? In terms of research, I see a couple of things. One is shoring up the infrastructure that supports faculty research so that we can get more and larger grants out. We can do more ambitious kinds of projects. And part of what that involves, and you alluded to this, is breaking down the silos between the colleges. Right now, it's harder to work across colleges than it needs to be. And there's so much interest and there's so much excitement about the potential of working across colleges. But we do need to make it a little easier than it is today.
So while we are still on the topic of GW, there are a few questions that are coming in, and let me ask one of them. You know, safety is a very important consideration for our students, for our faculty, for the entire GW community. And in your message yesterday, you actually outlined the campus safety procedures and security measures. I just wanted to see if you wanted to expand a little bit and talk a little bit more about why that is important and what are we doing to make sure that we are all safe.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, the conflict that has broken out since Hamas attacked Israel has had reverberations across the world and across the country and has played out particularly strongly in higher ed. And so this is a moment where safety is especially salient. It's always important, but it's on everybody's mind right now. And so a lot of what is important there really is having enough eyes on what's happening on campus and enough people available to intervene before things get a little too hot. And so a lot of what has happened in the last 48 hours is through a lot of partnerships, including support from MPD and other areas, making sure that we have a lot of the right kinds of help on campus. Some of that's additional officers, but it's also additional staff in the residence halls. It's more capacity in CAPS so that if a student is having an anxiety issue, that they have someone they can go to. So it's a multi-layered, multi-dimensional strategy.
Well, thank you for that. And I know as you are going through the strategic planning and returning to that, there are some very important topics on the minds of many presidents and deans, such as innovation or sustainability or DEI. Would love to hear a few of your thoughts. And in particular, I look at the business education, for example, where there is a big gender gap. In business education. Of course, GW business programs have majority women, so that's something good. But would love to hear your thoughts on why that is important and each of these topics and what we can expect under your presidency.
Sure. So this, you said innovation, sustainability, and DEI.
That's right.
So I'll start with innovation. This is a place that has absolutely amazing bones for generating innovation. Just one example, we have a College of Engineering that is right across the street from our medical school. We have a School of Law that's got incredible programs in intellectual property and cybersecurity. We've got a School of Public Health that is award-winning and doing absolutely amazing work, and they're all within 3 blocks of each other. So that point about innovation, we have so much opportunity in that space. I think if we can break down the silos, like we talked about earlier, we can really do a lot of the academic work that generates that. But there's another element to the innovation ecosystem that I would love to see GW build up a little more, which is the translation of that amazing research into businesses, into technology. And in speaking with deans and others, I think there's a real interest and appetite for that. So that's a piece of it. In terms of sustainability, can't say what's coming, but there is some wonderful news coming on sustainability. And sustainability is one of those topics that has the ability to stretch across every single one of our colleges, to inspire every single one of our students. And I think that's another big opportunity that we have at GW is some more scaled experiential opportunities for our students, and I believe sustainability is one of those. It is something about which our students are absolutely passionate, and they are interested in digging in and finding creative solutions to help to save our planet. They're also getting wonderful opportunities to tell the stories of the good work getting done. And so it's not just doing the basic research, it's also telling the stories in ways that can touch people's hearts and motivate them to act. On DEI, we have a lot of great programs already. I mean, one very important thing that happened this year is for the first time, students who are Pell eligible, meaning they're low income and they are also disproportionately members of underrepresented groups, graduated at exactly the same rate as the rest of the student body. I mean, that is amazing. And it's a lot, yeah, that deserves a round of applause. And that's a lot of hard work by our students and a lot of hard work by our faculty and staff. And so that's a wonderful example that we can continue to build on. I think there is more that we can do to lead in the DEI innovation space. There's also, I think, more that we can do in faculty and staff hiring and retention. So those are a couple of areas I do think we'll be focusing on.
Great. So there are a few questions that I'm going to combine. I'm reading them all right now there. One of them is really about from the alumni who are talking about how U.S. education is so dependent on philanthropy. And they want to know from you on how they can help to support GW and support your agenda. There's also questions coming from some of our students who are seniors who are graduating and asking the same kind of question as to what advice do you have for them to stay connected and how they can help. And earlier today, the GW Women in Business, which, by the way, if you don't know them, they're a fantastic organization. They have gone on a trip, and I really enjoyed seeing them off on the bus. They were into New York. Otherwise, they are always here attending these George Talks business series. And they had asked a question about what does building a community mean for you, and why is it so important? And this was from a question from Nada Makshor from GW WIB. So combining that, people are generally asking, what is community for you, and how can they help support the community?
So community for me is that sense of being a part of something that's bigger than any single one of us. You know, it's that sense of what we can do that is greater than the sum of our parts. It's often that sense of connection, you know, that holds us together even when times are difficult or tricky. And I think, you know, the way we foster that, I think there's a few ways that we foster it. And I think some of that is very much embedded in building pride and confidence in what we've done and who we are. You know, we're a very, very special institution. And just to give you an example, getting that membership in the AAU was a little bit of a surprise. We didn't see it coming. I think part of what builds the sense of community is that shared sense of excellence and that shared understanding that we together are a part of something very special. Also, appearances in the NCAA basketball tournament help a lot because that gets the students very excited. So it's a combination of who we know ourselves to be, what we understand our core common culture is, and then those wonderful experiences that bring us together and give us that sense of common conviviality and fun.
Great. So you mentioned community and you mentioned basketball, and I'm so happy that even before your presidency was announced, or just when your presidency was announced, your wife Sonia attended a basketball game already.
Yes.
So why is athletics so important to a university?
Oh, yeah. So there is, I think, something about the excitement of watching a group of your fellow students or watching a group of your students excel. And I think we're all competitive by nature. And I know I can say that with a business school audience. I might not be able to say that in other colleges, but you know, I think we are all competitive by nature. And so the excitement of seeing a group that represents you triumph over and over and over again and get closer and closer and closer is exciting. I have been at an institution that had a rise from being a good, solid football program to being a national championship football program. And what I saw is it sweeps everybody up. I don't really like sports. I love to win. And even somebody like me, you see the sense of community and the sense of power and the sense of pride that it creates. And there is something there, I think, also that everyone can relate to. It doesn't matter who you are in the community.
So it
You can
builds
all
community.
have that common.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I want to change gears, President Granberg, a little bit to talk a bit about the future of higher education. Yeah. And in there, I would love to hear your thoughts on some of what you think of the top, higher ed trends that you are seeing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So higher ed is in a period right now where it is the focus of disruption. And I'm choosing those words very carefully. Higher ed itself, I would not say is a particularly disruptive industry. We are a very traditional industry. We are an industry that is slow to change. That isn't necessarily a bad thing in terms of what we do and how we work with students, but there are forces of disruption that are impinging upon us. And those trends, I think, are very important for us to keep in mind. One is the growing debt crisis. And when you look at the decreases in the trust and confidence in higher ed, that's in direct proportion to rising rates of debt. So really getting our arms around the debt crisis that's a big trend I think we need to deal with. Innovation in higher education is another trend. There are some very bold experiments going on around the country, really looking at different kinds of models for higher ed. For example, a true 3-year degree, new ways of thinking about valuing work experience. Every university is going to at least need to be able to think about and meet some of those trends. The last piece is the value that students get from their higher education experience. That trend also, there's more and more attention to the question of value, to measuring the value, to quantifying the value. And so those are 3 trends, I think, that no matter how elite an institution one is, that those are things that are going to be important.
So one of the things that along those same lines, post-COVID, now we learned quite a few, we adapted very quickly, we were able to continue as a university, we do all that. Do you feel that post-pandemic higher education models are still evolving and will change? Or do you think that we'll return really to the pre-pandemic world if we can get rid of COVID completely?
So this is an interesting conundrum, because when the pandemic hit and we all had to go online, I think many of us thought that this was the end of residential higher education, because we assumed that the online learning was going to go extremely well and it was really going to challenge the residential higher education model. And exactly the opposite took place. What we learned is how important it is at every level of education, higher education included, to learn in person, to learn together, to learn in community, if you will. And so that was a surprise for a lot of us to realize, to understand that an 18-year-old really can't learn calculus sitting alone with a Zoom screen. They actually need the community of others. They need the in-person experience. So that butts up against the innovation that can come. Mm-hmm. And so I think that what we're going to see increasingly is greater and greater capacity to handle multiple modalities of education. And what we're going to have to figure out is how to make sure that's not so exhausting for the faculty that you can't have high quality with each one of those.
Great. So, with increasing technology, innovation, and whatnot, there is also a lot of questions coming in very elite universities about the ethics in research and technology. Mm-hmm. And what are your opinions on how we can still maintain ethics in research and technology with all the technology that's going on, including ChatGPT and et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah. Research has always depended upon the integrity of the individuals involved in it. It's always dependent on that. And now more than ever, we have to depend on the integrity of the individuals involved. Science magazine did an editorial when ChatGPT came out, and it listed 10 principles. And I thought They were really good. I mean, one of them was Chat GPT is not an author. It can be a source. If it's cited, it's not an author. What's also interesting there is some of these technologies may actually make things like research fraud or research misconduct easier to identify. So I think it's going to cut both ways. Mm-hmm. But fundamentally, the enterprise, it's too dynamic, it's too multifaceted to not, at its fundamentals, depend upon the integrity of the individuals involved in the research.
Excellent. So, President Granberg, I'll take a question from the student before we leave the GW topic and go into the leadership lessons that I want to talk about a bit. Yeah. This is Monica writing, as a member of Lambda Theta Alpha Latin Sorority Incorporated, what are your thoughts on Greek life and how do you think it benefits the students?
So I think there are a lot of benefits to Greek life. There's opportunities for leadership. There's opportunities for problem solving. There's certainly the creation of incredible lifelong friendships. In Greek life, houses have cores that the members are expected to be responsible to. They have access to a wonderful alumni network. So I think there are a lot of things that Greek life, not unlike being on an athletics team, provides to students. And it's an incredibly grounding thing, especially when you're leaving home and you're sort of out there for the first time on your own, to be embedded in that kind of a community. And so I do think that our Greek life and our Greek organizations make a big contribution to the quality of our student life and provide the kinds of experiential lessons that we want our students to receive.
Great. So I want to switch gears a little bit. And as I said, I want to talk about some leadership principles, that you follow. Would love to hear a bit about what principles do you have from perspective of leadership? And in particular, as president, what is your most important responsibility?
Oh, okay. So fundamentally, I'll start with the second question. Fundamentally, as president, my most important responsibility is the safety and security of the campus. If we assume that is on an even keel, then I think the president's most important responsibility is to be the chief catalyst and chief cheerleader. Sometimes I've heard it said, chief fundraiser and friend raiser. I think that the president should always be the institution's greatest advocate, should always be the institution's greatest booster. There are a lot of people who will let me know when there are important problems that need to be solved. I think, and this is a leadership principle for me, that to be positive and joyful is a choice. And it's a choice that I think when leaders make that choice, to see the good in the organization, to see the strength in the organization, even when sometimes it can be difficult, then what that does is that gives other people permission to feel that same sense of strength and that same sense of joy. So I think that's one of the most important things that a university president can do. So
I think you may actually have answered this, but let me rephrase it because we have received a lot of questions from the audience regarding contemporary events, right? So I'd like to summarize and say, what is your perspective on the role of leadership in times of conflict?
Yeah. I think there are a few important roles that leadership plays in a time of conflict. One is modeling the kind of calm and measured determination that is necessary for dealing with a significant crisis. These are very stressful times. If the leader is getting angry or short or panicky, then it destabilizes everything. And so maintaining calm and purposeful demeanor is actually an important part of leading. It's also important, when you're dealing with a crisis, there are always immediate issues, there are short and medium term issues, and there are long-term issues. And you're constantly having to balance between each of those factors. And part of the leader's job is to keep in mind the medium and longer term issues as they're supporting the staff that are dealing with the immediate issues, so that you don't in the immediate engage in a short-term solution that causes great big long-term issues later. And then the last piece is get the boulders out of the road. When the chips are really down and you've really got a issue to deal with, it's very easy for teams to get lost in the morass of trying to do things the way they're used to. And they need a leader to pull those barriers out of their way so that they can move quickly. And that's another, I think, very important element of leading in a time of crisis.
There are some very amazing and important lessons in what you just said. And I hope I can remember them, but the good part is I can watch it again, so get that part again. But by the time, as you progress in any kind of leadership roles and you become president, it's more and more the decisions that come to your desk are decisions coming to your desk because others couldn't solve them.
Yes.
They are always complex, always difficult. So how do you sort through those to make a decision?
That's a wonderful question. So I think it is it's very important to have an ethical, as you pointed out later, an ethical and decision-making lens that you can apply. And I can talk a bit about mine. But here's the other thing I have really learned is that it's important to talk to people and to listen to what they have to say about what's happening. I can't tell you how many times I've had an issue land on my desk that looks unsolvable. And when you make a couple phone calls, or you have somebody you trust, make a couple of phone calls, get the right people in the room, that very often the issue simplifies itself to where it's still hard, but you can pull away some of the layers and get to the fundamentals, and it becomes the choice becomes more obvious. It becomes clearer. But sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes you have to apply your own lens. And for me, there's a couple of things there. Fairness is extremely important. I will also say that I'm an institutionalist, and so what I generally do is I try to pull the lens out to think about the institution, because by the time it gets to me, it's generally a fairly big issue. So I always try to keep in mind what is best for the institution broadly and what is best for the students. And those are the lenses that I apply when I've really got something where it's a choice that has to be made. It's a difficult choice that has to be made.
I truly wish we had had this conversation a few years ago. I would have made much better decisions in that case. But just
I don't believe that for a hot second.
Just along that, let's take an example of a difficult decision.
Yeah,
a student submitted a question which is difficult to answer. It's a complex question, so I'm going to ask you. And the question is, how much time should a student invest in learning what she has planned? So there's a concept of planning what I want to do in life, and I'm going to spend this time learning when I come to the university. That's what I'm going to concentrate on, versus learning to adapt, to keep myself flexible and don't know what the future will be. So what is that right balance for a student to really dedicate the learning to what they had planned? How is planning more important and then sticking to it, or is learning more important without a plan?
So students I know often come to college thinking, I know exactly who I want to be, I know exactly what I want to do, and I'm going to move forward on that plan. The latest research suggests that college graduates will spend 40 to 50 years working. There is no way at the age of 18 that you can plan for for the students in the audience, I will just say this, you cannot plan for that. So I think part of what is really important to pay attention to is are you engaged with what you're doing? So if you know you want to be an engineer, if you know you want to be a marketing person, and you get started on those courses and you find your mind engaged, you find yourself interested in what's going on in classes, you find yourself curious about the activities available to you, then keep going. But if what you find is that you're struggling to pay attention, you're struggling to be engaged, it probably means that as good as it sounded, it's not right for you. And so I think it's important to be attentive to that. And I think it's always important to have some things that you do in college where you actually don't know what they're for, you're drawn to them. And I think you should trust that. You should trust where your heart sends you. And you're going to find amazing things as a result.
That's excellent advice. So let me ask you a very different question in terms of decision making. I'm facing sometimes the same kind of thing. There is in academia very important to involve everybody in decision making, and it creates a culture of trust. And it's really sometimes a very good decision when everybody is involved. On the other hand, there is expediency, and sometimes you got to make a decision very quickly, otherwise it's just not going to work for it. So what is that right balance you can strike between involving everybody and yet having to make a decision very quickly? And when is it when it is right to make that call?
And that is something that particularly I think is indicative of academia, because to make a decision without a lot of consultation can often be quite controversial. I was actually asked this very question when I was interviewing for this job, and so I'm going to see if I can remember what I said. So I'll tell you what my approach has been. I mean, I've been a faculty leader for 20 years, and so it is different from being in corporate America, very, very much so. So my approach has always been to build relationships with the critical constituencies before there is a crisis, and to build trust by engaging in that consultative process, which is such an important part of academics, on an ongoing basis, and in a relatively streamlined fashion, but to do it regularly so that you build up this bank of trust, and to consult fully and in the more fulsome way when that is called for. To not play games with that, or try to not do it when it really ought to be done. And what I've found is when you do that, you build up a bank of trust that you can then draw on when you need it. And sometimes you need it. So how do you know? How do you know whether or not you need it? Sometimes it's very clear because there is either a financial crisis, or there is an HR or a medical crisis, like COVID was a very, very clear example. Sometimes you just have to call it. And there, what I always try to do is ask myself, do you think you need to make a decision because you really need to make a decision, or because you just really don't want to deal with all the pushback that you're you're going to get? And what I found is you can be honest with yourself. You will know in your heart which one is right. And so if the situation really calls for it, then you have to trust yourself and go ahead and make the decision.
Awesome. So there are a couple of questions that are coming from the audience, and I'm going to paraphrase them into two-part question. Okay. One of them is about your past achievements. What are you most proud of, or most happy about? What successful decision you made, or experience you had? And the other one is the opposite, looking ahead. Let's say 5 years from now. What will give you great happiness professionally, in terms of what would be the measure of success that you will use?
So in terms of looking backward, a couple of professional decisions that I made that I think worked out especially well. I said yes at a couple of really important points in my career. And one was when I agreed to lead the development of the strategic plan for Clemson University. And Clemson had been through a period of time where there had been 2 or 3 very top-down kinds of strategic plans. And so we decided to make this one bottom up, and we had the support of the president and the provost to do that. And that was a wonderful decision, because the community was so hungry. Like, we sensed it, and we were right. The community was hungry to have a plan that belonged to them. And so we built out a very robust process, and as a result, the community really embraced the plan. And so that's an example of a leadership decision that I made that worked out extremely well. How will I judge my own work 5 years from now? Well, I think you suggested before that it ought to be that the business school is named, and I do think that would be fantastic. But there's a few things that I would love to see 5 years from now. One is that this is a university that really knows how good it is, that really knows. I mean, when you look at places like Duke, Carnegie Mellon, University of Pennsylvania, they're all institutions with issues, but one thing they don't doubt is their excellence and their capability to do more. And I would love to see GW just be fully in that space across the institution. And that involves getting out from underneath COVID, having some stability in leadership. I would love to see us have a substantially stronger philanthropic and fundraising program. I think that's going to be very, very important for us. I would love to see that we have cracked the nut on the cross-disciplinary collaboration. There's so much opportunity here. But there are some boulders in the road. I was talking about those before. There's some boulders in the road that we have to get out of the way. And so if we have some really cracking cross-college programming and research going on, then I will also feel good at that point.
Great. I have an eye on the clock, so I'll ask you two more questions. One, I will ask the question that I had in mind, and one, let me give one more student a chance for this question. And this is about wellness and resilience. And the student is asking, how do you advise the students in regard to a balanced lifestyle from wellness and resilience perspective?
Yeah. I mean, right now, both mental and physical wellness is a challenge for students across the country. This is something where COVID really took a toll. And so if I'm advising a student, the first thing I'm going to tell them, I'm going to sound just like their mother, is get enough sleep, drink enough water. That really is important. But also, it is important to keep connected. To not let yourself get isolated, to make sure you're taking a little time for things that really nourish you, and to also remember that you wouldn't be here if you weren't incredibly smart and pretty amazing, and to rest in some confidence about who you are and how and what a wonderful future you have in front of you. It can be hard to see that sometimes when you're 18 or 19 years old. And there's a lot of resources to help with that.
Great. So let me ask you one final question, President Granberg. I know it's difficult to, of course, imagine that you have any time for fun, but when you do have time for fun, what do you like to do for fun? And of course, DC offers almost everything. Yeah. And when the concept of fun is different from what your concept of fun for your wife, Sonia, is, who wins?
Oh, Sonia wins. Sonia definitely wins. So we love to walk. We love to explore the city on foot. We're having a wonderful time getting to know this place. And so that's one of the things that we love to do together, is to take walks, to explore the city. We both love history and politics. And so this place is nirvana for all that. And so that's been great. And then I love time with friends. I absolutely love time with friends. And we're making some friends here in DC. And this weekend we get to welcome a lot of really good friends who are coming to the installation. And so that also is something that for me is just a wonderful part of life, is spending time with people I care about.
Well, President Graham, thank you very much for a wonderful conversation. Appreciate your time very much. And we are certainly looking forward to this special week of inauguration festivities as well. Thank you all also for joining us today, and please stay tuned. We'll be announcing the next George Talks Business date very soon. Thank you again for joining.
Thank you so much.